Welcome back to season 2 of Between the Scene podcast. My name is Peter and I'm joined by my buddy Aaron.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to season two, and today we're going to be discussing why reboots are taking over the movie industry.
Yep.
Because recently it seems like almost everything is a reboot at this point,
Oh, yeah, almost
right?
everything. Yeah, so before we get started, if you haven't already, leave a like, leave a comment of what you want us to do next. We're fans of all things cinema. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date on all our future episodes. And uh, yeah, let's just jump right in. Alrighty, Aaron. So, reboots.
hmm
They are taking over. It has become a serious issue where creativity is at an all-time low. Um, and box office sales are also at an all-time low. People are
hmm
streaming everything on streaming services, and uh, more and more we find that people are easily sold, and reboots are definitely a good thing to sell to an easily sold audience. What do you
And it's
think?
not that reboots are new; they've been around for a long, long time.
Right.
Even going back way, way to early 30s, the Universal Studios. A lot of those old horror movies like Frankenstein comes to mind, where they just did reboot after reboot after reboot, and that's almost 100 years old. They came out in
Yep.
1931 was the original.
Yep.
But right now, even more I would say than ever before, nostalgia is huge right now.
Yep.
People want to see things that they've already seen. They want to relive the past, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I love nostalgia. We all love nostalgia a little bit.
Right. And that
Um,
that's a good point, is nostalgia. That is actually what is selling. People want
yes.
to, especially nowadays with, let's say, for example, people grew up on Star Wars, or people grew up on Aladdin or
Yeah,
The Little
exactly.
Mermaid. Nowadays, it's like they want to relive that innocence of childhood. They want to, before the whole world took them and, put them in a suit and tie, working 9 to 5 every single day. They want to live that whole childhood experience again, and it's becoming evident that the movie giants are definitely taking advantage of us.
Right, and the way I see it is that those movies from your childhood, they're not going to go anywhere. They're still here. You could always go back and watch it.
Right.
So each time, almost always, and I'm going to stress almost because of course, there's exceptions to the rule, but
Yep.
almost always when they're rebooting, when they're redoing these movies, trying to bring them back, something gets lost. Some part
Hmm.
of the original vision, some part of the original intent of what these characters meant, what the story meant, gets lost when you're just trying to do a replication of it,
Right.
I feel. But one of the main reasons for this is economics,
Hmm.
money. Money is the big reason for all the reboots, all the remakes, and that's because it's easier to use stories and characters that people are already familiar with, that people already like, as
Hmm.
opposed to making a new story with new characters that people now have to watch it and get used to it. They could say, "Oh, I know Jason. Oh, I know like Star Wars." So
Hmm.
they're
Yeah.
already they already know all this stuff, and then going into it, they know what they're gonna see, pretty much.
Right. Right. And the problem with that is, like, for people who are actually cinema fans, who actually watch for the story, and it's not just they shut off their brains during it. And
hmm
I mean, even then, as a cinema fan, there are movies where I can shut off my brain and just zombie out. But um,
Yeah.
when I spend $12 on a movie ticket and go to the theater and see the same exact story, there's no creative choices, there's no differences in the live action form versus the studio illustration form of, let's say, the upcoming movie Little Mermaid. The only difference is that it's becoming more and more um
hmm
woke, to say, like, just to
Yeah.
appease to the modern audience. and the story will probably be the exact same story as it was, what, 15, 20 years ago.
Right, and I think like just from what I just said and what you just mentioned, that's a perfect example of that is the Disney remakes when they're doing live action remakes of animations in some cases where I don't even think they're that old. I mean, I guess they are now at this point with The Lion King came out in the late 90s. Is that right?
I think 91, dude.
But it doesn't feel that old. It's not like a an old movie to me by any
Right,
means, but
right.
either way, all of these animated ones, they're making live action versions of it. And it's way
Yep.
easier instead of writing a new character or making a new character design, writing a new story, they could just take what's already been made. And it's kind of laziness on
No,
that point,
what
but it's saving money too.
I heard someone describe it as this: you have a nice steak for dinner one night, and the next night you have nothing else to eat besides that steak. You just slop it on a plate, put it in the
Leftovers.
microwave. Yeah, you put it in the microwave, and you get that crappy, reimaging of what was so good.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Um, One example was, and I haven't seen the new Mulan movie, but Mulan, um, they and here's, I guess, where they are like having trouble of like trying to be creative with their storytelling
Hmm.
is in the new Mulan. I heard that like there was no sense of struggle for Mulan. There was no sense of growth, and she was just an all-powerful woman character, and that's what the modern audience wants to see nowadays. But people, it backfired on them because that's not what people want to see in a story. That's not a
Yeah.
good story. That's not storytelling. That's just recording something that doesn't have any
Hmm.
conflict, any sort of growth in it.
And I actually, I'm a big fan of Mulan. I haven't seen it in a while, but as a kid, I
Yeah,
watched that movie a lot.
yeah,
I think part of the what made the original one so great is that it was different than a lot of the other like Disney, Cinderella, Snow White, those classic princesses that like the stories are pretty similar. I always felt like Mulan was a little bit different, and
right,
it did have the message, like women can do anything a man can do, but I didn't feel like it was pushing it so hard, maybe as some of the more modern ones do, with like just jamming that message down your throat and having that be the main thing. Like it was there, don't get me wrong, but it was woven into an actually interesting story,
right.
in my
Exactly,
opinion.
exactly.
And I'm sure a lot of that, I didn't see the new one, but I'm sure a lot of that got lost
Yeah,
with remaking
I
it.
it's also worthy to note that um um it didn't do so well. One, because of COVID, movie theaters were shut down, and
Right.
also, I guess a sense of like racism towards Asian culture, um, because of the whole coronavirus starting in Wuhan, China, and all that
Hmm.
stuff. So it didn't do well for multiple reasons, but the biggest reason why people hate it so much is because it doesn't have enough tension in the character development. Um, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
seeing with a lot of reboots is that they're so focused on CGI, they're so focused on choreography, they're so focused on action and the best cinematic look rather than telling a good story. Um, but let's go into some more examples of some upcoming reboots. Or actually, let's go into some older reboots, say probably from like 10 years ago, from movies from the 90s and 80s and such.
So I could think of a few good ones. Like I'm a big horror fan, so a lot of
Right.
the examples I could think of are in the horror genre, which is famous for reboots,
Yep. Yep.
remakes,
Yep.
all that. Um, I think there were a lot of decent ones. There, of course, there was a lot of crappy ones. Don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of decent ones in the early 2000s, even the 2010s. Like
Yeah.
some examples that come to mind: Friday the 13th.
Mhm.
There was a 2009 remake.
Mhm.
I guess you would call it a reboot. It had nothing to do with any of the other ones.
Yep.
I thought it was solid. It was pretty solid. Same with the
Mhm.
Evil Dead one, which was 2013, I want to say,
Yep.
and another one, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We've spoken about this on a previous podcast. The 2003.
Uh-huh.
reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think is solid. I think it's a solid remake. I think that if you never even saw the old ones, you'd be perfectly fine starting with that.
Yeah, give me
Um,
examples of what makes them good though.
so it stays true to the original. Like
Uh-huh.
I'll use the Texas Chainsaw as an
Okay.
example. It stayed like the beginning, you're like, okay, we're kind of rewatching the original, but then it completely goes off in a new direction that doesn't really have too much to do with the other movies, which I like.
Uh-huh.
It's doing its own thing, but also giving like a nod of respect to
Right. So you still get the
what started
nostalgia,
it.
you get the nostalgia, but you also get a new story.
And it also doesn't I don't I'm gonna make a new word here, like cheesify
Okay.
the make it cheesy. We'll call it
Sure.
cheesify.
Sure.
So it doesn't make it cheesy, which I've noticed a lot, especially recently, do.
Uh-huh.
Um, the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's a good
Uh
example. We could stay in that. The newest one on Netflix. I think it just released on Netflix.
uh-huh.
It didn't have a theatrical release, but that one did not give a lot of respect to the original idea of
Or
it, just to
the
say
the
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 least.
one I think it the one before that too. It did have a theatrical release, and it was the one where they were really pushing the whole work woke terminology, like cancel culture, and they're like, we're gonna cancel, or you're so canceled, and pointing their phones and all of that. It's just like it's almost like a slap to the face to its original fan base.
Yeah, another, I'll go into this franchise, Halloween. A lot of people, that's a new one's coming out too
Uh,
right now.
Another new one.
Another,
I thought they ended it. I thought he
s-
died.
so it's confusing. Halloween's a confusing one. There's the original Halloween series,
Yep.
which is started by John Carpenter.
Uh huh.
Um, the first two are fantastic. They're really, really good.
Yep.
Just awesome slasher movies. The third one, a lot of people forget unless you're a big horror fan into
Is
it. It's
the
not.
third one H2O?
The third one is not H2O. That one came out in the 90s.
Okay.
So there were six, and they're sequels, I guess you can call it, or I guess five sequels to the original
Okay.
that I would count as like that original one. So there's the first and second one, which is like they take place right after each other.
Uh huh.
Second one takes place right after the
Uh
first
huh.
one. The third one has nothing to do with Michael Myers. John Carpenter saw this coming where he didn't want to um tarnish the reputation of his creation basically. Like he didn't want to make so many Michael Myers that it got kind of silly.
Uh huh.
He didn't want that. So the third one had, even though it was called Halloween, did not have Michael Myers. It was an original story. A lot of people don't know that. Even though
Uh
it was
huh.
called Halloween, he wanted each next Halloween to be something different.
Yeah.
Just a different horror story that takes place on Halloween. It
Okay.
didn't work though. Everyone wanted to see Michael Myers.
Uh huh.
They're like, "What? Halloween 3 doesn't have Michael Myers? Like, what is this?" Um, so then the fourth one, he didn't work on. Other directors took it over, and it got less. Each movie did worse than the last one,
Sure.
up until six, which I think came out in 1990 or like they released them all through the 80s,
Uh huh.
and it went in a weird direction where they keep wanting to add, I guess, new things to the story, even though it wasn't there in the original. Like they made it that Michael Myers was part of a cult,
Uh huh.
and that before you didn't even know what his motivation was. He just wanted to kill people, I guess.
Uh
But he
huh.
got messed up from his sister, and then now he's just like a killing maniac. But
Yeah.
they made it that a cult is in control of him, the Thorn cult,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. I remember my buddy Luke and I did a podcast on that.
no one liked it. No one was down for it. Halloween 6 is kind of a horrible movie. Maybe we could have a whole podcast on that, talking about it one day.
Yeah.
Um, then H2O came out. Halloween Resurrection, the Rob Zombie Halloweens,
Mhm.
another reboot, a complete reboot of it.
Yeah.
So Rob Zombie, which I actually do like the first one, but I have mixed feelings about Rob Zombie's, mainly the dialogue in a lot of
Okay.
Rob Zombie movies. But other than that, the first one's really good of the Rob Zombie remake. Then he made another remake which wasn't as good, and then we have the most recent series where they brought Jamie Lee Curtis back.
Uh-huh. Yep.
which the first remake, I forgot what year. I want to say 2015. I want to
Around
say
then. Around then.
around then
Yeah.
was actually pretty good. Was that
Mhm.
stayed true to the original? Had that feel, had that John
Mhm.
Carpenter feel. Um, then a year or two ago, around Halloween, they made Halloween Kills, which was a
Yep.
sequel to the reboot.
Yep.
So that reboot, I should have mentioned before, it accounts for the first two movies, but ignores all the Thorn Cult stuff, all the stuff after that. It's just the first two movies happen, nothing else. And they brought it
Uh-huh.
back. Halloween Kills, which was after that, was horrible. Was not really a good movie at all.
Mhm.
Was just all over the place. It just didn't have like any feel to it. I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And now they're planning another one, so we'll see how that goes. But my
Wasn't there
expectations aren't
was
too high.
the third one with Halloween Kills. It's what Halloween ends.
He's still alive at the end. Like they almost kill him, but he's still alive.
And then what's the one where they put him through like a cheese grater or whatever?
I think that's I'm not sure. I
That's it.
forget.
That's the newest one that's out right now. Or from what I remember with the podcast I did with Luke,
Yeah.
he told me that he saw the newest Halloween,
Mhm.
uh, and that they killed him off completely. Like, there's no way he's coming back.
Well, they're making a new one, so they're gonna find some way. They kind of, from what I remember, and I saw it in the theaters. I have not seen it since.
Uh huh.
Um, they almost kill him, but it's like implied he's still out there, like they usually do. From what I remember in the latest Halloween Kills, the everyone in the neighborhood like beats the shit out of him basically, and then he just kills everyone and walks away. It's really kind of stupid,
Uh.
but that's what I remember. I don't remember him going through a cheese grater, but it sounds vaguely familiar. Maybe it happened in a different one, like that could have been the end of H2O,
No,
which
man.
Jamie Lee Curtis actually came back for too.
Well, the end of H2O. Um, Michael Myers switches bodies with one of the first responders, and they kill the first responder thinking
Yeah.
it's Michael. That's when the audience doesn't know that until the next Halloween movie,
Hmm.
um where he comes back and they have to explain because they did try to kill him off, but legally they were not allowed to. I can't remember the whole legality issue behind that, but there was a whole legal battle with killing Michael off after
Well,
H2O.
it seems like with Michael and Jason Voorhees, these type of like slasher villains, no matter what happens, like you could kill them as dead as you want to kill them, but money will bring them back. The idea of making a sequel will resurrect them somehow.
Yeah, and that's let's go on to the point of the differences between sequels and reboots.
that's a
So
good that's a good starting
obviously
point.
sequels they do continue the story, prequels start the story, um, and reboots just recreate the story. Like how would you describe it?
Pretty much like that. Sequels are supposed to be just like that, like a sequence of events.
Uh
So
huh.
they're taking what happened and they're expanding on the story rather than redoing the story with the characters and doing it in their own way. Um, I think like sequels might have right now just with the barrage of reboots. Sequels hold a little bit more integrity because it's like, okay, I already saw what happened. Now we're continuing the story
Yeah.
other than like let's just scrap it and start new, but use the characters. Let's use the characters that are already established to make our own movie.
Right.
And when they do that and go too far away from the original intent, I always kind of think, why not just make a new movie? Why not just take
New
this idea
characters, new
and make your
story.
own
Yeah.
characters?
Right. Right.
So I see less sequels now and more reboots.
Yeah.
And then there's the idea of a prequel, which
Hmm.
is it happened before.
Yeah. Like putting
There's some good examples of that. Let me think of one that might come to mind. There's some bad examples I could think of too. Like there was I forgot the title. There was
Star
a
Wars.
So yeah, Star Wars. Actually that's a really good example. That
Yeah.
Star Wars is one where I actually really like the prequels, but when I go back and watch them now,
Mhm.
they're not as good as the original. The original
Yeah.
Star Wars is the
Yeah.
quintessential
Yeah. 4, 5,
Star
and
Wars.
6 is solid. Like they're good movies, and then you have the idea of the prequels 1, 2, and 3, and
Hmm.
again, it goes on to the whole like, yes, it's years later that it's being made, but it's just the whole focus on the filmmaking side is the effects, the
Hmm.
cinematography, the choreography, and all that. When when in reality, what they should be doing is if they're making a prequel for something that was so mega successful, it's
Yep.
gotta be better than what they made, and that's the issue that people are having watching reboots is that they have such a nostalgia for that story that when something comes out and it's not 10 times better than the original story, it's automatically considered a failure.
It makes me wonder that because of all the popularity of nostalgia right now,
Hmm.
and we're just going back and reliving the past, what is the next generation going to be nostalgia? Are they going to be nostalgia for the nostalgia that
That
we have
yeah.
going on right
Yeah.
now? Like, if they're making nothing, not that many new things, what are we going to be nostalgic for, like 10, 20 years from now?
Right, right. Like people, little kids are gonna be like, "Oh, Spider-Man's so cool," and it's like, which one? Like how? Like there's so many different Spider-Mans and so many different reboots of it, and now they're just trying to mix all the stories into one with the multiverse and the all this
Yes,
crazy stuff. So,
speaking of Spider-Man, talking about nostalgia, I watched the newest Spider-Man in the movie theater. It was
yep.
No Way Home.
Uh-huh.
When they brought out, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and all the
Uh-huh.
Spider-Men came together, and you just heard the whole theater like, "Oh my God!" Like they're clapping, and it just seems so like, okay, so they're showing you what you've already seen. You've already
Right.
seen the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. You've already seen the Andrew Garfield, and they're just throwing you a bone like, "Wow, they're back!" Like, and that's cool. Like, be happy for what you're happy for, but it just seemed like it's almost like Hollywood is throwing you like the cheapest bone. Like, oh, you already
Right.
saw this, you liked that before. Here it is again,
Right.
and everyone
Right.
is just so eager to be pleased by it. It
Yeah,
seems, yeah.
um and what's truly sad is that like you said, everyone's clapping, everyone's like screaming at the top of their lungs in the theater
Hmm.
because is Toby Maguire pops up on stage.
Right, it's
Um,
like you're seeing
there's
what you've seen before.
they're so easily amused, and it's just it makes me wonder when will cinema die and just become when will camera technology and storytelling just become commercial and rather than fiction
I'll,
and
I'll say this: I've seen little glimmers of hope, especially in the horror genre recently. I do see
mhm.
some positiveness. Not that there's like tons of groundbreaking movies coming out right now, but there's more, I would say, new ideas, especially like studios like A24,
Yeah,
are coming up with like movies that almost seem like indie movies, but they're big releases, that don't follow that like very rigid Hollywood,
cookie cutter.
yes,
Yeah.
that type of formula.
Um
One
my
that comes to mind is X and Pearl. Did you see Don't Breathe?
yep. Yep.
And did you see Don't Breathe 2?
Don't Brief 2 is trash.
I kind of liked it.
Wait,
I
was
kind
it
of liked it.
was
It wasn't as good as the first, I'll say that, but I did find myself enjoying it in the
Don't
theater.
Breathe was the guy who's blind,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I didn't like the second one. I didn't like
It
it.
was a little like there was like a group of like organized criminals,
Yeah.
as opposed to like this like these like kind of young kids that don't know what they're doing. Like, yeah, we're gonna rob this guy's house, and they're in way over their heads.
Yeah.
The second one was way more action oriented than horror, I would say.
Right.
Wasn't as
Um
good, no. I still kind of enjoyed it. I'd have to rewatch it again. Like I've only watched it in the movie theater
mhm.
that one time.
I saw recently I had my girlfriend over and we watched Midsummer.
Nice.
Have you seen Midsummer?
I have, yeah. That was a good
Yeah,
original.
right. And it was it was something I've never seen before. You're like, yes, there are millions and millions of cult movies, like not cult classics. I mean, like
Hmm.
movies about cults. Um, but the way that just the story in it was so bizarre and so unique.
Yes.
It felt fresh. It was good.
Side note on Midsummer, there's a lot of Hollywood movies that try to recreate psychedelics and the visuals on that. Like there's an old one called Shrooms. I know we've seen that
Yes,
before.
yes,
And it's kind of goofy. They'll just throw a filter on and just like,
yeah,
whoa, it's weird. Midsummer had probably the most accurate, if anyone's ever experienced anything like that, it has the most accurate representation I've ever seen.
yeah. Like, and it
Midsummer.
wasn't like you said, like a filter, and it wasn't like in your face, like, oh, you gotta look
Yeah.
at this, you gotta see how wavy everything is. Like, it was so soft and subtle.
Yeah, a lot of stuff you see in that and you're like, I've seen that before. It's actually pretty close. It's pretty
they
close.
they did a good job on the effects there, yeah.
Hmm.
But mainly it was a story that really stuck out to me because it was just so bizarre and something I've never seen before. And yeah, it definitely worth the $3.99 I paid to rent it.
Yes, Midsummer was a that's an example of where I think there are some good ones cropping up that are new. That's not just like let's redo Friday the 13th. And I'm not saying let's never do it again
Mhm.
because as we said, it could, kind of get cheesier and
Yeah.
kind of lose its the original value as it goes on. But I like seeing them again. I like seeing Michael Myers around. I don't want them to go away. I
Yeah.
don't. I just think that they could probably do a better job rebooting them and redoing them than they have been. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. Um like what would, if you can, give me an
Hmm.
example with Michael Myers. Like what would you do if you were being paid millions and millions of dollars to make a reboot
Hmm.
for the for Michael Myers movies? What would you do to um interact with the audience and make them feel the nostalgia, but also have a new story?
So it's a pretty like narrow.
A
You have
fine
to
line.
balance it. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
fine line. You have to balance. You have to keep it balanced, just like you said, with keeping the nostalgia there, keeping the old fans happy,
Yeah, because
while but you
they
don't want them to say, okay, like I've seen this before. Why are you even making it? I could just go back and
right,
watch it. If you keep it like the original too much, then it's like, what's the point? We could just go watch the original. It's probably better.
right.
And then if you change it too much, you're gonna piss people off. They're gonna say,
Like
"What? You changed it."
with the whole tribe sense where he comes from a tribe or something. Uh, and which movie was that where they had the whole tribe where it was like they performed a ritual on him and like a
I want to say
curse.
how it started in Halloween 5 when they
Uh
started
huh.
seeing the symbol of the thorn, and then Halloween 6 is when they went
Yeah.
all into it.
Yeah. So like that's where things like just went too far. Like they
So,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Sorry. No,
Okay,
you're good.
so what I was gonna say is if I were doing the reboot of it,
Uh huh.
I would kind of maybe do what they did in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, where like the beginning of it, I'd keep it okay, like we're watching Halloween, and it's pretty similar to the original.
Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, like I'm saying how they did it, where like the
Oh
beginning
yeah.
almost looks like okay, it's like starting off like how the original started off.
Uh
Like I
huh.
know this, just to get them hooked in, and then I'd have my own original story. It wouldn't be the same as the first one. Like different things would be happening, yada yada. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't make it too far off from how the original one played out. I
Right.
wouldn't make it
Right.
too ridiculous. I think when they try to put their own spin on it and they go too far, they almost like it's almost like they're parodying it. I wouldn't want to parody. I would want to honor it in a way by not straying too far from the source material, but while not just remaking the movie like plagiarized.
Right. Um, speaking of plagiarism,
Hmm.
the live action movie for Beauty and the Beast is literally like scene for scene the same exact movie. Um,
which seems like Disney's really doing that a lot now.
ex- exactly with every
Hmm.
new reboot they're doing. Yeah.
And it saves money because why do you have to pay people to write an interesting story? You have to pay writers. You have to pay good writers to write a good story. Costs
Yeah.
money. Not even just making the animation and all that. You have to have people write it. When you already have the story written out for you, you're saving so much time and money. It just boom, you can just shoot a movie out. And oh,
Mhm.
you know Beauty and the Beast. Of course, people are going to watch it. You already know that they're going to watch it. It's not taking too much of a risk.
Yeah.
That's another reason they're reducing the risk because they know that if they have an established story and established characters, people will watch it.
Mhm.
And if they make something new, they don't know yet. They're trying something new. Maybe it won't
Right.
work.
Right.
So that's the main reason for it is that they don't want to take any risk anymore.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of sad.
What we talked about how I felt about Midsummer feeling so fresh and unique.
Yeah,
Even though it does have this some very used up ideas of cults and all that stuff. Is there any
sure.
movie that you've watched recently that was like this is fresh, this is new?
Hmm, that's a good question.
And it's
Not
probably another A24 movie that you probably will
not
think of.
fully. I mean, X and Pearl. Have you
Uh-huh.
seen those movies yet?
That's the whole sexual like
Yeah.
the sexual movies.
They're not fully all that, but yeah, it's in there. I mean, the plot, at least the first one, they're making a porn, so yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But other than that, I would call it more of a modern slasher. It's a
Uh-huh.
slasher for sure, but it doesn't. I wouldn't say it follows like that played out formula that got popular in the 80s and 90s with all those slashers.
Mhm.
It felt pretty unique, but I'm not going to say like, wow, it was completely nothing I've never seen before.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't say that. What's another one? Have you heard of Terrifier
No.
and Terrifier 2?
No.
That's getting a lot of attention in the horror world right now. And I have some mixed feelings about it. So Terrifier 1, I saw a long time ago. I started it not too long ago, but like some years ago.
Mhm.
It's on Tubi TV. It's about a killer.
Tubi.
It's about a killer clown, which everyone's seen before.
Yep.
Um, the acting in it was, and I can watch some bad movies, but I was like, wow, this is not good. I didn't even finish watching it,
Uh-huh.
and then I had someone else tell me like, hey, check out Terrifier, and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't really like it. Like, yeah, watch it again. The special effects, like the guy who made it, I guess he's really into those old movies. He's into practical effects. He doesn't believe in CGI.
Uh-huh.
So I gave it a rewatch and kind of got past the bad acting because it's a low budget movie
Sure.
and it's super violent, but the special effects are really insane. Like
Mhm.
the practical effects and the blood.
Mhm.
And they recently put out Terrifier 2, which had a way bigger budget. Still
Yeah.
like kind of cheesy acting, but and I need to see that, but I've seen clips from it and it seems pretty. I don't want to say it's like breaking grounds by any means, but it's definitely bringing back a lot of what I find really cool about horror movies. So I appreciated that
Yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah.
they're I think there was an interview with the creator of it, and he mentioned Tom Savini, who did a lot of the special effects for the Friday the 13th.
Mhm. Mhm.
He did Dawn of the Dead, George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead.
Mhm.
Um, Old school special effects guy. I love watching videos on the making of those movies
Uh-huh.
because it just seems like he would show up on the spot and not sometimes he wouldn't have an idea of what to do, but he would just like look around and create a special effects almost on the spot with what he
Mhm.
had. And he was just like hands on. I guess what you could just like in the moment, like oh we need to make this, like let's just get this and that and like make it happen.
Yeah.
And he just had this style of doing it which worked and it was just really cool to see. And I like that some people are bringing that back.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
is it the best movie ever? I wouldn't say so, but I think there's maybe some potential there, to see
Yeah.
what he does in the future.
Yeah. Um I this just popped in my head. Some movies that I really like are
Hmm.
Studio Ghibli movies
Yeah,
because those are like they're really deep in metaphors and deep in like all of those tricks to like tell a story without just straight up telling it.
Hmm.
Um um and I feel like I could watch those movies and not get bored because they are definitely so unique and all of that. Um but let's go on to
Hmm.
some good reboots. For example, I would say the Dark or Batman Begins, Dark Knight, all of that. I think those that was a good reboot.
Would you consider those reboots? It's kind of hard to tell with the superhero genre.
Yeah, I would consider them reboots. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Um,
there's also Evil Dead, the 2000 what 13 one. That was a
yeah,
good one.
yeah. That
I
was a
remember.
good one. I think this goes back to some stuff I mentioned before without when they try to reboot it and then like put too much of their original take on it, that's when it gets bad. With Evil Dead, it's a hard one to reboot, I think. I think it
Mhm.
would be really hard just because Sam Raimi is such a good and original director where his movies have a certain feel that seems like pretty hard to do if you're not him.
Yeah.
Um, Especially the balance of horror and comedy. You know, he
Mhm.
has a very distinct style of doing it. The 2013 reboot did not go for comedy. And I think that was to their favor. I think if they tried that and failed, it would have been a much more ridiculous movie. It would have gone in a much more worse direction. I think they
Yeah.
did the right thing by keeping it that feel of the seriousness, the cabin in the woods and all that. They kept that and kind of stuck with that and just tried to make a good modern take on it. And I think it was to the success. I think it succeeded in doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with the Friday the 13th one. And it was kind of the
Which
same thing where they didn't try to
which
make it
one?
to the 2009 one. Have you seen that?
No, 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 but you mentioned that. Yeah.
So it was kind of the same thing. Like it's a pretty basic story.
Uh-huh.
It's just more kids going to the woods. Jason comes after them. You know, some things in between, but that's the basic premise.
Yep.
If they tried to make it too out there, like oh now Jason, and they've tried that in the past. Jason's in New York. Jason's on the in space. He's in the. Have you seen Jason X?
No.
That's when Jason's in space.
No, I haven't seen
So they've
that.
they've tried that in the past, and
Uh-huh.
it doesn't work as well. I think
Yeah.
they got to stay true to the original, but of course, don't do a word for word, scene for scene
Yeah.
remake. That's not going to
You
work.
got to add some color to it.
I guess another one I can mention right off the top of my head is Saw. Are you a Saw fan?
Dude, you stuck me in your basement. I remember it was like 10 o'clock at night. You put on Saw 1, and I almost threw up, dude. It was back when we were in high school, and I remember I was like, dude, can
I
we watch something else? I feel nauseous.
For a while I kind of avoided Saw. Like I knew about it when I was a kid, and I think I saw part of it when I was a kid. I saw Saw.
Did you see
And
Saw?
same thing. Like I was like, I'm not really a torture guy. I'm still not. I'm still not a. Some people like toward like the Hostel movies. They're
Uh-huh.
sometimes they call them torture porn. Kind of a weird
Yeah.
name, but
Yeah.
they like. I'm not really about like watching a guy sit there and get tortured the whole movie. I don't really like
Yeah.
that. And I thought Saw was all like that. When I went back and really watched them, yeah, there's a little bit of that. But the main point of the movie is actually kind of like a detective movie.
Right.
And I
Right.
do. I'm not gonna say they're the best movies ever, but I actually do like some of the first Saws. And I'll say this. I'll say this. I think Saw 2 is a superior movie to Saw 1.
Uh,
And I think it's more entertaining. And that's a
okay.
good example of like that's a sequel. That's not a reboot, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah.
sequel doing better than the first one.
Mhm.
I think like if you were gonna sit your friends down and watch a Saw movie, you better pick Saw 2.
Okay.
It's the most entertaining for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about horror movies is you most of the time with sequels, you really don't have to watch the first one, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of the beauty of horror movies, but then at that point is it I guess it would still truly be a sequel, but the ability to be able to watch it out of order and still enjoy it, like that's a pretty fun feature of horror films.
Oh, I guess we should mention going back to Evil Dead,
Uh-huh.
Evil Dead 2. that has a very confusing, like, whether that's, is that a sequel, is that a reboot?
Right, right.
I consider it a reboot, and I think I have the DVD commentary
Yeah,
on those both those movies. I think Bruce Campbell considers it a reboot too, because it kind of just ignores the first movie, but
right,
has the same
right.
character. It's kind of
Yeah.
strange.
We've talked about this, The
Yeah, we
Evil
have.
Dead. If you want to watch that, click on the link that I'll post in the description, so you can watch that whole podcast about The Evil Dead, because we do go far in depth.
We
And
go we really in depth on that whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah, and those are movies that will stick true to my heart. I still have yet to seen uh Evil Dead, the one where he goes back in time.
So Evil Dead fans, like, their people are crazy about those movies. A lot of them love that movie. They love
Uh huh.
Army of Darkness.
Uh huh.
I've seen it like 3 times. It's not my favorite. It's just
Yeah.
not. I don't know. Maybe I like that cabin in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and I guess this is a good time to mention I think I mentioned it before. They're making a new Evil Dead too. I didn't say much about it, but
A new
from the
Evil Dead 2?
a new Evil Dead 2, like TOO, like
Oh, okay,
they're
okay.
also making a new Evil Dead
Yeah.
again.
Uh-huh.
Um, it looks like it takes place in a city.
Hmm.
So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But for me, with the Evil Dead, I guess maybe I stay true to the original. I like the cabin in the woods. Keep it in the
Yeah.
cabin in the woods. I think that's like just one of the defining things about it,
Yeah.
I
There's nothing
guess.
scary. There's nothing more scary than a haunting in the middle of the woods where no one can hear you scream. So,
Yeah, it looks like they're like in an apartment in a city. I don't know.
with
I'll have
the
to
with
see
the
how
new
it
one?
goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their
Yeah,
mom is
yeah.
getting possessed. They didn't show too much, but that's what it's looking like.
Do you know when that's supposed to release?
No, I don't. Probably sometime this year, probably in the
Mhm.
summer or fall.
Yeah. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed for if people are going to continue with this whole reboot fad. Let's hope that they do a better job than the last 10 years.
Yeah, like I know we've been kind of trashing on reboots and stuff this whole podcast, but we truly want to see these movies do well. Like we
Yeah.
want to see the Titans get honored by good reboots. We
Yeah.
don't want to
We
see their reputations be tarnished.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess that's a good place to end it. Thanks again for joining us. This is season 2, episode 1. We are still working on a name change.
Hmm.
Um, it has been pretty difficult to find something unique now that everyone is doing podcasts, and yeah, we're trying to be unique and trying to find something that'll work. So if you haven't already, leave a like, leave a comment of what you want us to do next. Again, we are fans of all things cinema, so if you got something from the 50s, if you got something from yesterday, if you got any genre, anything, as long as it's not a rom-com, we'll discuss it. Maybe we'll do a rom-com, but um, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Aaron, for hopping on and taking some time out of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, guys, signing off.
Have a good day, guys.